Mark Sisson, what up? Welcome back to the show. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Max. Always good to see you and be here.
Yes, likewise. Love any chance I get to hang with you. Well, we've got lots to talk about because it's been a minute since we've caught up, but let's start with longevity. There's a new study that came out recently that found that the average baby boomer, person over 65, is popping between 4 and 5 prescription drugs every day just to get by. But that's not even the scariest part. In fact, if you look at a certain population of those that take even more, about 6.1% are on 10 or more drugs.
Jeez.
This is the concept of hyperpolypharmacy.
Okay.
But you've thwarted all of that. You're not just surviving, you're thriving, you're in amazing, you're like in better shape every time I see you.
Well, thank you. I'm trying, and it's a task at some point. I just turned 71 this summer, so
my God.
I'm in my 8th decade. I'm like, that's just a mind-boggling concept.
And your brain is sharp as ever?
Yeah, I hope
your
so.
brain is almost as sharp as your abs.
Well, we'll see. But I feel like it is, and part of that's just the ability to get up in the morning and have the time to do a bunch of puzzles and sort of brain teasers and brain sharpening activities, and diet, and I would say refraining from many of those pharmaceutical drugs that you just referenced. The fact that people are taking so many drugs in the chase for longevity, right? First of all, we have to ask, what is longevity? What does it mean to a lot of people? Does it just mean living longer? Because in my world, it's not just living longer. I'm not chasing those numbers. I want to define my life in terms of quality of life. Like, am I able to move around this world? Am I able to go for a walk, literally smell the roses, go down the street and talk to a neighbor? Can I walk to the gym and do full range body motion activities? Can I get on a plane and go to Italy and do a walking tour? I mean, mobility is absolutely one of my defining characteristics of longevity, of a quality of life. Access to cognition and memory. So am I able to remember, first of all, have conversations with people and do exchanges and remember what they said, and then am I able to remember what happened yesterday or last week and recall that? And I think one of the things that defines humans through our language is the ability to tell stories. We are almost at the quintessential element of who humans are. We are storytellers, and we love stories, and our whole life is about stories, whether it's movies, television, fiction, gossip, soap operas, podcasts are just opportunities for people to listen to other people telling stories. Right?
You're right.
So that part of cognition, am I able to engage in conversation with people, and then adaptability, the ability to take what has happened to you and not self-victimize, but to be able to roll with the punches, to be able to move on from bad events, and so those three things, mobility, cognition, and adaptability, are kind of resilience, are kind of the three defining characteristics. Now let's cut back to the average baby boomer taking 4 medications, you said.
Between 4 and 5.
That's the average. 5. That's the average. So you got to figure they're taking a blood pressure lowering med. They're probably taking a cholesterol lowering med. They're taking a hydrochloric acid lowering med, a PPI of some type. They're probably taking a painkiller because of their arthritis or whatever joint issues they've got. So they're taking a non-steroidally anti-inflammatory drug. Maybe they're taking, I think one of the largest classes of drugs is antipsychotic, anti-anxiolytic meds. I'm just going to guess that's what the average of the 4 are.
Yeah.
When maybe a glucose regulation med, like a metformin. All of those things can be addressed with lifestyle. This is the ultimate irony. So with the advent of Ozempic and Wegovy and tirzepatide and all the variations of these agonists, you have to ask yourself, okay, are we trying to provide an opportunity for people to live a healthy, pain-free life through medication, and is that a good thing? Maybe it is. I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to raise my hand and say probably not. I think any of these things that you can address through drugs, you can probably cure or mitigate much better through a lifestyle modification, with a few exceptions. So where does that leave us? I don't know. I mean, my chasing of longevity is not so much measuring my blood glucose every day or my blood pressure every day or being concerned about my cholesterol levels. But it's really about how do I feel? Like at the end of the day, if I want to enjoy life and I want to feel good and I want to feel excited to get out of bed every day, like literally, why do people get out of bed every day? Motivation, passion, purpose, whatever you want to describe it. That is also a part of this longevity experience for me. I mean, I know so many people, who hang on day to day. It's like, oh, geez, another day. And, I wake up, I do the same thing. I watch TV. My mother who passed, a couple years ago, she had lung cancer. And they were for 6 months. She's like, Mark, can't you do anything for me? Can't you help me exit? Because I'm in pain all night. I take the drugs. I can't wait to get up in the morning. I get up in the morning and I'm in pain. I go lie on the sofa and watch television. I can't wait to go. It was a horrible, last 6 months for her. So anyway, I know you've had, a relatively similar experience with your own mother.
Yeah.
And
yeah, totally. I mean, and also I think it's worth mentioning that there's not a physician on the planet that knows how all of these myriad pharmaceuticals are interacting in a body that's growing increasingly frail with age.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not that we want to, I don't like to place a stigma on pharmaceutical drugs, but it's just that nobody knows how these drugs are interacting with one another in one system, in one body.
And then you get to 10 or 15, and it's a real complex equation.
I mean, 6.1 people are taking 10 or more drugs. I mean, by the end of my mom's life, she was on 12 different pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
She was on, dementia medications. She was on, cardiovascular related medications. She was on, I mean, there were a lot. And I would have these conversations in the doctor's offices with her because it seemed at a certain point that she was on drugs that were having opposing effects on one another. She was on one cholinergic drug, and then she was on another anticholinergic drug.
Yeah.
And it's just that these drugs are typically not tested. They're tested in isolation.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't take a pain medication now and then, but it would be hard to predict how a pain medication might be interacting with.
Well, and so many of the meds are just designed to counteract the side effects of the original prescriptive med. So there's a lot of that stuff going on where, how
have you been able to, how have you managed to engineer a life that actually looks a lot more similar to how those that live in the world's so-called blue zones are typically described? How have you been able to architect your life so as to mirror that? But you're somebody who travels all the time. You're flying all the time. You embrace modern conveniences.
Sure. I mean, I totally. That's a good point. I embrace modern conveniences. I live a fairly, what I would say, hedonistic life. Like I enjoy every bite of food I eat, so I don't sacrifice at any point in the pursuit of longevity by cutting back on my dining pleasure. Now, I know what not to eat, but my list of foods that I do choose to eat is so vast right now that I never feel like I'm sacrificing at a meal. I think one of the things I've done is I've realized that if you do things the appropriate way, I chase sort of this minimum effective dose of anything. So what's the least amount of exercise that I can do to maintain strength and mobility and resilience and VO2 max and all those things? Not what's the most amount, and the more I keep doing it, maybe I'll get incrementally better. But what's that sweet spot where it's a minimum effective dose of lifting weights, of doing some cardio during the week, of doing a little bit of stretching but not too much? What's the least amount of food I can eat? And that we've talked about this in the past. Not what is the most amount of food I can eat and not gain weight and not feel like a slob, but what's the least amount of food I can eat, maintain muscle mass, maintain strength, never get sick, and most importantly, not be hungry. So I sort of use that as okay, what's the least amount of drugs I can take to offset the pain or whatever it is I'm dealing with. One of the things that happened to me as an endurance athlete was I overstressed my heart. It's endemic in the community that I grew up in the 70s, where people thought that the more activity you did, the more cardiovascular work you did, the longer you'd live. It's almost like the more miles conferred greater longevity on you. Well, it turned out not to be true. And so there's millions of people from my generation of runners and cyclists and triathletes who have AFib. I have PVCs. I have premature ventricular contractions. So I took medication to slow my heart rate down because of the damage I did to my heart.
Wow.
But here's what happens. So I have one cardiologist who says, this is what we got to do. This is your problem. We're gonna slow your heart rate down so the max you can ever get is 130 beats a minute. And I did that for 5 years. And it sort of resolved, in the short term, my premature ventricular contractions, which would result in a skipped beat every third beat. So every third beat would be skipped when I got past 90 beats a minute. Anyway,
Sounds scary.
It was alarming. It was scary. It wasn't life-threatening. So then I go see a new cardiologist, and I get a EKG workup, and he says, Jesus, he says, you've got second-degree AV node blockage. I'm like, okay, what do you think about that? He said, well, if you had third-degree node blockage, we'd be installing a pacemaker tomorrow. I'm like, okay, so what do we do about it? He said, well, what drugs are you taking? I said, well, I'm taking this one drug that the previous guy, put me on for the PVCs. He goes, well, that's what's causing your AV node blockage. So I had to drop that drug. It was crazy. So this is the treadmill that you find yourself on when you start going down that route. And so many people do that. I mean, the classic that we've talked for 10 years, is these PPIs, where people say, I can't digest food, or I get heartburn. And I get heartburn, and so the doctor gives you PPIs to take all the time. Well, now because you're cut your pH of your stomach, you've raised the pH of your stomach. Now you can't digest food. It gets worse. So then you have to take something else like a Tums to alleviate the short-term acidic thing. It's a weird rabbit hole that people come down. And
it's hard to get out of it.
Yeah, it's hard to get out of it.
Yeah. That is that's a problem. Yeah. So endurance, running, like endurance style marathon training, you've discovered over time, well,
it's not the panacea
for health.
It's not ideal for health. In fact, marathon training is antithetical to health, I would say. So I have a new book coming out. Here's my plug. It's called Born to Walk, and it's a real indictment of the running boom of the last 50 years as having been pretty much wholly inappropriate for all but maybe 2 or 3% of the population. So most people who are running with the idea that they're going to live longer as a result of that, or they're going to lose weight as a result of that, or they're going to somehow improve their cardiovascular performance and reduce stress, are actually not achieving those goals through running. So we do a real deep analysis onto how this came to happen, like the idea that in the early, when I started running in the 60s and 70s, the only people who ran were runners. Right, you were skinny, you were adapted to being a runner, you were genetically gifted to be a runner, and so runners were just pure runners in the 60s and 70s, all the way almost through the 70s. And the shoes we had were thin. Either I started running in Chuck Taylors, and then there was a shoe that Phil Knight imported from Japan. It was the Onitsuka Tiger shoe that was real thin. It would be called a minimalist shoe today. And those shoes, while they were what runners wore, they sort of made it clear that you couldn't run more than 50 miles a week because your feet would tell you when it's time to stop running, right? So then along comes Phil Knight, and he develops this thick cushioned running shoe that enabled good runners, great runners, to do more miles. When I say great runners, they had good form, they were mid-foot landing, they didn't get injured at nearly the rate that other people would get injured. And so these shoes came on the scene in the mid-'70s, along with another sort of perfect storm of Frank Shorter winning the gold medal in Munich in 1972 in the marathon, Bill Rogers, winning Boston, Jim Fixx writing a book on running, making it, Dr. Cooper writing a book on coining the phrase aerobics and saying the more running you did, the stronger you'd be. All these things came together, and then what happened was in the next few decades, people said, "Oh, this running thing is great, and I'm gonna now that even though I'm not a good runner and I'm not necessarily suited to running, these thick shoes allow me to run. I don't jar the ground. I don't hit these, get this painful thing on my feet when I run." But then what happened was these thick shoes encouraged bad running form. And so people could go out and do 30, 40, 50 miles a week in their training, trying to lose weight. And with these shoes, they were able to do the miles, but then they'd get other injuries. So even with a high tech aspect of these new running shoes that were coming on the scene, the number of running injuries has never in the 50 years has not decreased one iota. To this day, 50% of runners are injured at some point. 26% of runners are injured at this moment in time, all the time. It's like it's a worse injury rate than the NFL has.
Wow. Well, it's like you'd think that your feet starting to hurt would be the check engine light that would
exactly, but because your feet don't hurt because of these thick cushioned shoes, feet are supposed to feel the ground. You're supposed to feel everything you step on, and that's that ground feel, what we call ground feel, which is available as in bare feet or thin shoes, is completely negated when you have thick, stiff running soles in your running shoes. So the ground feel, when you do have the ground feel, by the time you weight that forward foot, the brain already has all the information it knows on exactly how to scrunch the arch to absorb shock, how to roll the ankle out a little bit, how to bend the knee in the right way, how to turn the hip. All of these things, what we call the kinetic chain, work perfectly on somebody who's barefoot. So you can take a non-runner or an overweight person and you say, okay, take your shoes off and run down the sidewalk. They will run perfectly because the body now all of a sudden knows exactly how to absorb the shock without slamming the heel into the ground with every step. You put shoes on that same person and now they're just heel running, or they're, you see them spending twice as much time on the ground as they are in the air. And all of that imports these forces up through the kinetic chain through the body, so then the knees fall apart or the hips or the lower back problems or whatever. All of this, by the way, is unnecessary because we are, so the book is called Born to Walk. So the idea is everybody should be walking a lot, as much as you can. That's the quintessential human movement. We are born to be able to run, but that doesn't mean we should run metronomically at 8-minute mile pace every day, day in or day out. Our ancestors certainly did not do that. Some of the original work done anthropologically on humans as runners suggested that we were what we call persistence hunters, right? We'd go out and that's how we got our big brains. That's how we became the top of the food chain, was we had this ability through a nuchal ligament in our neck and our radiation system with sweating to be able to run in the heat and track animals long distances and then stick a spear in them and dine. But what that doesn't say is, first of all, that didn't happen every day because you couldn't do that every day. They didn't train on the off days to go train for hunting. Their life trained them. They walked and they sprinted a little bit and they lifted heavy things, which is all primal activity. But they didn't have to train for running to be able to track a beast. In fact, persistence hunting should be called like persistence walking, stopping, stooping, smelling, tracking, jogging, sprinting, cutting the tangent over a 2-hour period, rather than grinding out 6-minute miles or 8-minute miles while you're hunting the beast. So that's sort of point number one about this persistence hunting theory. And the other part of this is that every one of those prototypical human beings was genetically able to, they were light enough to run with perfect form if they had to run, and were not overweight and didn't carry all of the burdens that we carry today. So the book is designed to kind of not just explore all of this weird, again, perfect storm of things that got millions of people running who probably should not have been running. It's giving runners permission to walk. It's telling everybody that you should walk and how to walk and then of course how to eat right to burn the fat that you thought you were burning when you were running. Many runners, like I came from the carbo loading era, where access to carbohydrate was so ubiquitous, it was everywhere, that you said, okay, I'll run 20 miles today, and then I'll carbo load tonight, and I'll run 15 miles tomorrow, and I'll carbo load tomorrow, and do it every day. Again, if you're going to train to win a world championship, go for it, do that. But if you're trying to lose weight, you want to burn fat, you don't want to burn carbs. But if you haven't trained appropriately how to burn fat, if you haven't reset your fat burning mechanisms in your body, when you go out to run as an overweight person, you're just going to burn off glycogen, glucose, carbs. And so you get home and you're like, oh, I'm thirsty, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm going to overeat, I'm going to consume more carbs to be able to do this again tomorrow. And it's this sort of never-ending cycle of consuming carbs never tapping into your fat stores, going out and struggling and suffering and running the next day, creating stress hormones in your body, literally. So some people who have spent a long time running and look skinny are actually skinny fat, right? They've cannibalized their muscle tissue. They haven't learned how to burn fat, so they're incrementally storing fat a little bit more every year. And they're like, I've been running for 6 years. How come I haven't lost weight and I'm not as strong as I used to be? Well, that's why, because running is catabolic. And walking is, if not anabolic, it's certainly anti-catabolic. You can walk wherever you want all day long and put in as many steps as you want, and then go to the gym and lift weights for 45 minutes and get the effect of that muscle mass and that strength and that power. If you run for 45 minutes every day, then try to go to the gym and lift weights, it's not going to happen.
And also running, correct me if I'm wrong, but it increases hunger, whereas walking doesn't seem to.
That's the thing. Walking is a fat-burning activity. That's exactly what we talked about. So when you go out and run, you come back hungry. When you walk, in many cases, one of the secrets I tell people is when you get hungry, if you're trying to lose weight, when you get hungry, go for a walk. And you'll start that metabolic process of accessing stored body fat, and you'll come back and you won't be as hungry.
I like that the title of your book kind of takes a swing at, there was a tome to running that was written maybe a couple of decades ago at this point.
Chris McDougall. I mean, he's a friend. It was a great story. It was called Born to Run, and it really talked about this notion that we are sort of obligate runners, that we're supposed to be running, that we were persistence hunters. But he also made a big point about running barefoot or in minimalist shoes. And one of the problems that arose from that concept was a lot of runners said, I should be running in minimalist shoes. And they went out and bought the thinnest possible shoes they could buy after having trained for a decade in thick, fat, cushiony, pillowy shoes. And they got hurt because they hadn't adapted their feet. They hadn't let their feet tell them and inform them not only of exactly how to land with every step, but tell them when it was time to stop running for the week.
It reminds me when you take your feet out of the equation, and then, as you were saying, it ends up importing all of that impact to other structures in the body. You take your feet out as the rate limiting, I guess, variable in your ability to run long distances, and suddenly you're importing that stress to the heart, to your back, to your knees.
Absolutely. In fact, when you look at what a running shoe is, a typical running shoe today, and cleats are even worse. I mean, if you look at soccer cleats or football cleats, they constrict your toes. So your toes are supposed to splay outward when you run. You're supposed to roll off your big toe when you walk and when you run. Well, if you've taken a running shoe or any typical shoe today, and you've scrunched the big toe over against the other toes, you've negated that entire part of the kinetic chain, which is really where everything initiates. If you've ever been hanging out in the gym, they call it the great toe, right? It's the big toe is also called the great toe, and the gym term is great toe, great ass. And what it means is you need to engage your great toe, your big toe, when you're doing squats or lunges or anything heavy like that, deadlifts in the gym. If you're trying to build your glute, you need that big toe to be splayed outward and to engage. And if you've scrunched it over, this is why you see a lot of bodybuilders and a lot of guys, weightlifters in the gym, take their shoes off when they're doing leg days, right? Because they want to engage great toe, great ass. They want to engage that. If you don't engage that great toe and that connection to the glutes, then you wind up compromising by using some of the stabilizer muscles around the glutes to do the work because the big toe has said, sorry, I'm out. I'm out of this equation. People, it's what we're trying to do is convince people that this entire kinetic chain does start with the bottoms of the feet, and it would be ideal to live your life barefoot, but that's not going to happen. We can't do that. We've created all these artificial hard surfaces like concrete and pavement and hardwood floors and marble floors and tile and all this stuff. So we can't really realistically go around barefoot. But the alternative is to have to wear minimalist footwear, and ideally to have minimalist footwear that has individually articulating toes. So you can actually roll off that big toe. You can splay the toes outward. Every time you step on a rock, your toes should should accommodate the shape of the rock, the tilt of and the texture of the ground you're walking on. I see in sports a lot. I see a lot of athletes who are now getting Achilles tendon ruptures, or they're getting high ankle sprains because they tape their feet up during the games. And what's happening is, it is the foot. If it's strong enough, the foot should be able to initially absorb 30% of that force, of that shock. But if you bypass all that by wrapping it in a shoe, and then say, okay, now we're going to start all the force from the bottom of the Achilles up through the calf, through the knee, I think that's where you get a lot of these injuries. So people should be training their feet more. They should be spending more time barefoot outside. They should be walking in minimalist footwear. They should be doing foot exercises and working on the resilience that way.
Do you have a daily step count that you
work towards? So I don't. I have, like different times of year. Like I go to France every summer, and in France I try to do 15,000 steps a day. I live in Miami Beach. It's boring to walk outside. So when I'm in Miami, it's more like I do more fat tire bike on the sand, more of that sort of cardio. But I still spend a lot of time barefoot in the sand. I still spend a lot of time, I'm barefoot in my house all the time. So for me, it's not just about the step count. It's about moving the feet. It's about strengthening the feet as a part of this entire kinetic chain.
So what would you say the major benefits of walking are?
Oh my gosh. So first of all, you will reorganize that kinetic chain. So we take people who people would say, well, my feet hurt when I walk because I'm duck-footed, or I'm knock-kneed, or I'm pigeon-toed, or I'm whatever self-disparaging terms they give themselves, wide hips. Everybody is born with a perfect kinetic chain. Perfect for you, provided the brain is able to take the information from the bottoms of the feet, that temperature, tilt, texture of the ground you're walking on, and then orchestrate your own unique kinetic chain, whether it's scrunching the toes, bending the arch, rolling the ankle out, or in, bending the knee in a certain way, and absorbing the impact of that walking step, that running step, that jumping step, that sprinting step, that side-to-side step, whatever it is. You need that sort of strength, and you need that sort of feedback. And so that's in walking, you are passively, without any sort of struggling and suffering, you're passively continuing to train this kinetic chain in an appropriate manner for your own biomechanics. But it involves either walking barefoot or in minimalist shoes, wide, thin, flat, flexible minimalist shoes. So if you're walking in, thick shoes, Hokas or whatever the running shoes are, you're not gonna be making that sort of corrective adjustment in your gait. Now you'll get the steps in, and your Fitbit or your watch will say, yeah, congratulations, you got your 10,000 steps in. But for me, it's more about the passively training your foot to incorporate this complete kinetic chain throughout the body in a way that then when you decide I'm going to go run, or I'm going to sprint, or I'm going to go to the gym and lift weights, now everything works perfectly because you've spent the time to really relax, realign, and strengthen that kinetic chain.
Does walking count as cardiovascular exercise?
Yeah, so it does. Yeah, so we hear a lot about zone 1 and zone 2. I mean, Peter Attia has been touting zone 2 for almost a decade now. Zone 2 is where most people should be hanging out all the time. And if you do a lot of zone 2 work, which is for most people, it's what we call the fat burning zone. We call it Fat Max sorry, I've co-opted your name several times here, but and you're not Fat Max. But Fat Max is that it's the maximum heart rate at which you burn the most amount of fat without crossing over into deriving most of your energy from glucose, from glycogen, glucose, carbohydrate. So for most people, that's 180 minus your age. So if you're a 40-year-old person and you're in reasonably good shape, 180 minus 40 is 140. So you should not be doing very much work, like no more than 15% of your work, maybe 20% at most, of your work above 140 beats a minute for the entire week, which means you spend a lot of time at 125 to 140 in that case. The more you spend in that zone, the more you're reinforcing your aerobic efficiency, your ventilation threshold, you're building capillary perfusion, which allows more blood to access the muscles. You're increasing it's mitochondrial proliferation. You're increasing the number of mitochondria. You're increasing the efficiency of the mitochondria, all through this low-level activity. And you have to do a lot of it, which is why we say, if I go back to my original Primal Blueprint from 2007, walk around a lot, move around a lot at a low level of activity. Always find ways to move throughout the day with zero emphasis on calories. It doesn't matter if you're burning calories. That whole thing about weight loss and fat loss comes from your diet, right? So if I can tell you that by moving around a lot, you're going to burn fat, but you're not going to burn a ton of calories, and don't even worry about that, but you're going to strengthen your kinetic chain, you're going to improve your aerobic capacity. And yeah, you can work up to a very fast walk or hike in the hills, or what I do is I put a vest on and I walk on a treadmill sometimes if I want to really amp it up. But even doing that, I'm not jarring my body with every step. I'm not courting injury further up the kinetic chain. I'm not causing a sort of a cortisol response to this life or death sensation that I'm giving my body by trying to overcome the thoughts of stopping. I mean, so many people. This book is 300 pages long, and it talks a lot about the obligate runner, right? Somebody who just feels like they have to go out and run every single day, at the expense of other areas of their life, which could be improved upon. But for some reason, this is in their brain that this is what I need to do. It's my self-flagellation or whatever it is.
Well, I actually find that a lot of people, maybe you've seen this, observed this, from your own experience, but a lot of people who tend to gravitate to these like ultra marathon style endurance training modalities tend to come from backgrounds of addiction.
Yes. No, it is a form of addiction, and let's be clear, it's a better form of addiction than the heroin was. Yeah. But it's still an addiction, and it still needs to be sort of examined as, what is my ultimate goal here? Is my ultimate goal to live an enjoyable life where I'm fit, and yes, I'm healthy, but I also have a family, and I spend time with my kids, but so many people that I knew in the endurance community would be their, I don't want to hang with the kids, I don't want to hang with the wife, I'm going out for a 100-mile ride, and then I'm going to take a nap, and don't bother me, I'm training for an Ironman, or training for a marathon. There's that type of runner, or endurance athlete. Again, I don't want to judge it as being bad, but I want people to examine their motivation. Why are you doing this? And what is the psychological effect of this? So there are ways to become really, really fit without beating yourself up. And that's kind of back to the minimum effective dose of exercise. What are the ways in which I can be supremely fit, as strong as I could be, healthy, never get sick, and then enjoy the rest of my life without agonizing over the fact that I missed a day in my logbook. You mentioned that I travel a lot. I travel a lot. And so when I'm in France, 2 months every year for the summer, I have a completely different routine from when I'm in Miami Beach, which is where my main house is. It's great. I mean, I like mixing it up that way, and I don't agonize over the fact that whatever I was doing in Miami, I can't possibly do when I'm on the road. Or if I'm traveling to another country and I don't even know where I'm going to go, and I don't know if there's going to be a gym. Look, European hotels are notorious for shitty gyms, like horrible gyms. Like an old broken Stairmaster on a treadmill that doesn't work and 2 barbells, with whatever. It's like, okay, so I bring a resistance band with me and I find ways to do it. And I don't agonize over the fact that I didn't hit my numbers and I didn't, continue my routine. I found something else to do. I found a walk to take or a hike to take or whatever it was. So where am I going with that? It's just, people who are, I think, addicted to this type of exercise are addicted to also the notion that if they miss a day, they get to beat themselves up. They get to feel guilty, right? So It shouldn't be that way.
It's also an escape, I would imagine, for many people.
Oh, it's a total escape. I know. I talk to a lot of people who say, "But Mark, I love to run." I'm like, I don't think you love to run. I think you love to have run. You love to have, you love to say you're a runner. You love to say you're training for something. And if you run with headphones on, for example, you don't really love to run. If you love to run, you would be in that space of like, okay, I feel great. I listen to the birds. How's my breathing? How's my, if I pick up the pace, is my heart rate gonna, be affected by that? All these different self-monitoring things that you can do when you truly love running. And yet most people like, I got to go run, so I'm going to put on, some Metallica, get me through it. So it is an addiction in that we talked about the runner's high, right? People used to talk about, well, I'm chasing this endorphin rush that I get from running, and that's how easy it is to cross over from, say, a substance abuse addiction, and then replacing that with this endogenous morphine-like substance, this endorphin that you create. But if you look at biology, endorphins are sort of a life or death kind of neurotransmitter / hormone. I mean, they're produced in life or death situations. So if you're running hard and long, you're going to produce endorphins. But if you're a zebra, having been chased down by a lion on the savannah, and now you're being eaten alive for 20 minutes before you finally pass, endorphins are sort of what give that animal that at least sense of calm and like, I'm not gonna go out kicking and screaming.
It's like nature's morphine.
It is nature's morphine.
So you're saying the endorphin rush that you get from an extended run is like your body essentially preparing for its demise?
So I'll give you an example. So now you're a persistence hunter in the plains of Africa, and you spent 2 hours in the heat chasing this animal and you didn't get it. Now you've got endorphins that are at least going to say, well, life is wonderful. It's not like a heroin type thing, but it's like, oh my God, we're going to die. All of this other possibility because you failed in the activity. So anyway, that's one theory about endorphins. Is it's an adaptation to loss and suffering and life or death situations that allows the body to remain relatively calm in the face of those things.
Wow. So what that formula 180 minus your age, what does that formula represent again?
So that's the maximum heart rate you should train at for 80% of the work you do during the week. That's the max heart rate, below which you are mostly burning fat and not a lot of carbohydrate. Once you exceed that heart rate, now the amount of, yes, you're burning more calories, but the amount of fat that's being contributed to your activity drops off, and the amount of carbohydrate, glucose, glycogen goes way up. So that's where we get to the point where we call it a no man's land of training, this black hole of training, where and so many people do it, where you're not training slow enough to prompt all of the things we talked about, the increased proliferation of capillary perfusion, of mitochondria, the efficiency of mitochondria, enzymes that take fat out of storage and combust. All of these things you want to do at below that heart rate, the maximum aerobic function or the fat max. Once you get above that, that's where we encounter the problems of now you're burning so much glucose and glycogen that your brain goes, oh my God, we have to immediately consume more calories and largely more carbohydrate to replenish what we lost here. That happens in this no man's land where you're not training at a low enough heart rate to have all of the aerobic benefits, but you're not going fast enough to have the glycolytic benefits. And there is a range above zone 2 where, yeah, you should spend 5% of your time during the week doing high intensity stuff. And the high intensity stuff works better if you spend more time doing low intensity stuff. So you see some of the best, like the guys who are running 2-hour marathons now, and they run at a zone 1, zone 2 heart rate for 80% of their mileage. The winner of the Tour, Pogacar, was on Peter Attia's podcast a while back and said he spends he'll do 5 hours of zone 1, zone 2 training. Now, his zone 2 is still putting out 300 watts on a bike, which is pretty incredible. But he doesn't want to spend too much time above zone 2 because it is that no man's land. All it does is make you tired and hungry, and it does not improve your work ability. It doesn't improve your performance capability, which is really the reason you're training.
Is there a subjective way to know, say you don't have a heart rate reader on you, is there a subjective way to know whether or not you're in that zone?
The best way is if you're running with somebody, can you carry on a conversation and not get out of breath? And so I see, I've coached a lot of people in the gym that I frequent in Miami who are women in particular, talking side by side on the treadmill, and for having a conversation, I'm like, perfect, you're in the right zone.
Wow.
But if you can't have that conversation, then dial it back a little bit.
Okay, so we've established the importance of movement and of training in that zone 1, zone 2 area. Where do you fit your resistance training into your routine?
Yeah, so once you've had that base, once you have that ability to burn fat, and some of that has come from the diet, in other words, you've realigned, you've retrained your body to be able to burn stored body fat through restricting carbohydrates and or calories through a process of either a ketogenic couple of weeks or intermittent fasting or whatever. You've achieved what we call metabolic flexibility. Now the good news is you don't really have to do a lot of work to get lean and buff and strong. It's not like you have to go to the gym every day. It's not like you have to burn a lot of calories. So the original Primal Blueprint, which now is, again, almost 20 years old, move around a lot at a low level of aerobic activity, lift twice a week, 2 times a week, go to the gym and lift heavy things. Not 5, not 6. And again, this is for most of the population who want to know what the minimum effective dose of the exercise is.
Right, like if you're a meathead and you love.
If you're a meathead, go to the gym 5 days a week. Do whatever you're doing. If you're training for Olympic lifting or if you're training for some sport, it's a completely different thing. But if you're an average person who just wants to be, wants to achieve ideal body composition, wants to be strong, look good naked, do all the things that we talk about doing, it doesn't take that much. So in this case, it's a lot of walking, a lot of low-level aerobic activity. It's lifting in the gym twice a week. And when I go, I do a full body routine. If it takes more than 45 minutes, I'm probably spending too much time. And one of the things you realize from doing that is that the body needs to recover from whatever activity you're doing. So the people who can go to the gym and lift every day aren't doing it right, because you should not be able to do it again the next day and the next day and the next day. You shouldn't even be able to lift that same body part 4 times a week, maybe not even 3 times a week, because you need time, the muscles need time to actually rebuild. The point of the workout is to slightly tear the muscles down, have the body respond to that hormetic stress with rest and nutrition to come back stronger. So with that in mind, twice a week in the gym, or if you're doing body weight exercises outside or whatever, and then once a week sprint. And sprinting is another key ingredient here. So now I talked a lot about the low-level activity, but you want to sprint once in a while. So 80% or more of your time spent exercising should be at that fat max heart rate or lower, and then a little bit should be at a much higher rate, like an all-out rate. And what does that look like? I got into it on X a couple days ago with Rhonda Patrick, who's talking about all these things you can do, Tabatas and a minute on, a minute off, as hard as you can go for 10 sets. It doesn't even take that much. It's like, if you're doing it right, you should be able to do maybe 30 seconds, take a 2-minute rest, do it again hard 30 seconds, take a 2-minute rest or whatever, and do it again 4 or 5, maybe 6 times. Now, if you're really good at it, 7, 8 times, or if you're really good at it, a minute instead of 30 seconds. But it's not a lot of work, but it needs the effort. And, the idea is that if you can do 30 seconds hard with a minute rest, or as Rhonda was saying, a minute hard with a minute rest, a minute hard with 10 times, you're not doing it hard enough.
Yeah.
Because you should not be able to do it.
That's
often.
hard. Yeah.
That's really hard.
I mean, I was thinking about my experiences on the assault bike, and
perfect example.
10 reps of that.
Yeah.
Is that's really
of 30 seconds?
of a minute on, a minute off.
No. So you haven't done it because it's impossible to do.
It's like near impossible.
No,
yeah.
again, if you know you're going to do 10 on, 10 off, you will dial your effort back to accomplish that, which is not the point. The point is high intensity. So so that's what I call the mix, the minimum effective dose of work to do, to be able then for me to play. So I'll paddle. I go for an hour and 10 stand-up paddle, pretty hard. I'll go for a fat bike ride on the beach, pretty hard. Those are the zone 3, 4, and 5 workouts that I'll do once a week to make use of all of the aerobic base I built, the strength and power that I did in the gym, and the sprinting I did once in a while.
What is a full body when you do go to the gym for the resistance training session? What does that workout
for
look
me?
like?
Yeah, for me, and I don't count legs in there very often. So I'll do a separate leg day every 10 days.
Well, because you're working your legs.
I'm working my legs
so
doing other stuff. Correct. So and I'm not trying to, I'm not building legs for explosive activity because I'm a competitive athlete anymore. I'm just doing legs as a adjunct to some of the upper body stuff I do. So when I go to the gym those 2 days, and usually it's a minimum of 3 days between always. I'll do pull-ups, rows, upright rows.
3 sets of each.
3 sets of each. Yeah.
Close to failure.
Yeah, but I mean exactly close to failure. I mean, I'm old enough now that I'm never going to PR again on any of these things. So my main goal in the gym is to not get injured. It's tough because I still have that. That mindset, that drive. So I'll do 3 sets of 10 or 12. On a I'll do some back work, some bicep work, some dips, a lot of body weight stuff, push-ups, pull-ups, dips, chest presses, things like that.
Machines versus free weights?
Yeah, it depends on where I'm at. I mean, sometimes the deltoid machine, the fly machine in some gyms is amazing. Other times, I just do dumbbell flies, overhead presses with dumbbells, compound lifts like that, curls once in a while, tricep push downs, things like that. Sort of the standard, beach body up, like look good for the beach routine.
How often do you update your routine as new data presents itself?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't update my routine as much as I should. And second of all, I don't know that new data really presents itself. It feels like so much of what comes around now has been like, oh yeah, Mike Menser was talking about that, 40 years ago, or Art Jones, who invented the Nautilus machine. Some of these concepts that people are espousing now is, this new research shows it. People have been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah, like everybody now is talking about stretch-mediated hypertrophy and lengthened partials.
Yeah, I mean, you got that. You have Tony Horton, who's a good friend of mine, P90X, talking about muscle confusion. So do something every workout. Do something different from the previous workout to confuse the muscles so they don't get used to the routine. I'm not into that space as much anymore. So I'm like, I'll do my routine, my Miami routine when I'm in Miami. I have a different routine. I trained at the Malibu Fitness gym yesterday. I had my routine there. I finished with rope pulls because I love the rope pull machine in Miami. I don't like the one in Kona where I'm going on Monday because I have a place that I go to in Kona. So I just sort of, I know what I like, but I have my routine at each of the gyms that I've set up over the years.
And that's the most important thing. I think there's probably tons of value to not getting distracted by the shiny new data.
Yeah. Well, the shiny new data, this is one of the issues I have with what's going on in this sort of biohacking community is that the data isn't impressive. And it's like, research shows that if you do this, your risk of that will decrease by 27%. But that's just when you talk about risk. That means that if 100 people do it, and this new strategy, instead of 6 people having an issue, only 5 have an issue, and that's a 27% decrease. That means nothing to me. That's just a risk factor that I'm my own, entity. I'm an N equals 1. I'm a unique individual. And so I don't even look at those studies and go, these percentages that they're throwing out. It just, it doesn't mean that will happen to you at 27% or 26% or 48%. It just means that on a general population, some number of people experienced a different outcome than the control group. It's meaningless to me. So back to how do I feel? Like, what makes me feel like I'm getting stronger? What makes me feel like I'm getting more powerful? What makes me feel less inclined to be injured? What makes me feel more aligned in my kinetic chain when I do this?
Yeah, totally. There's something to be said for mediocre workouts performed consistently and the benefit that they have in terms of your health and body composition compared to, let's say, the perfect workout done inconsistently.
No, 100%. I agree with that. Yeah, I joke with people all the time. I see the same people at the gym. Any gym has a membership of 1,000 people, and of those 1,000, the same 10 show up every day. And there's another 30 or 40 who wander in and once. But you look at people in the gym like, fuck, here we are again, another day. How you feeling today? I didn't want to come, but I did, and I'm here, and I get credit for showing up and going through the motion. Some days you go through the motions. Some days you go, I am so ripped today. I'm hitting it so hard today. That's the day you go, okay, I'm gonna hit it hard. And that's that intuitive approach that I have versus my training chart that says, okay, Thursday's the day you go hard. Well, if I wake up Thursday and I feel like shit, I'm not going to go hard. I try to, because I know enough about my own body and how I've adapted over the years and how I've responded to exercise over the year, I'm able to adapt the workout. Like, I'll walk into the gym and I literally don't know what I'm going to do, first or second, or how I'm going to do it, but I put it together based on my knowledge of what works for me and how I feel that day. I've made a big deal about being the anti-quantified self. I don't do the wearables. I don't need a heart rate variability app to tell me, okay, today's the day you're on. I'm like, no, I know whether I'm on or off, and I know I don't need an app to tell me that I slept poorly when I think I slept pretty well. It's like I'm getting my head with that stuff.
It's so true. Yeah, when I go to the gym and I'm feeling like it's one of those days where I just feel like I'm going through the motions, sometimes I'll just do the exercises. I'll just I'll drop the routine or whatever preconception I had about the workout that I intended to have, and I'll just do the things that make me feel good and happy. I'll do like shoulders or I'll do like arms, because something, even a shitty workout's better than no workout.
I agree. I mean, to the extent that you don't get injured, but again, doing, I would say a shitty workout is 80% of what you could have done if you were really on it that day. That's fine. That all counts. That's life. That is consistency. And consistency is a really huge element in this. Again, if we look about longevity and quality of life and all the things that we're talking about, consistency probably is right up there with sleep and good nutrition. Just the ability to get up and even in the face of not wanting to do it, deciding you're going to go do it. And now, if you feel like crap when you wake up and you say, I'm taking the day off, that's allowed too. But the day off is allowed to people who train 6 or 7 days a week.
Yeah.
The day off is not allowed for people who train once or twice a week and have a trainer and drank too much last night and say, I won't be making it today. Charge me anyway.
Yeah, if you're training once or twice a week.
Yeah,
you should definitely be making it to those workouts.
Yeah.
As one of the most, I think, important thinkers in the nutrition space, I always love to do a check-in with you to see, what your current way of eating looks like, areas where you may be pivoting, evolving, changing your mind on certain things. What does your diet look like today currently?
Yeah. I forget if we've had this conversation in the past because it's been going on for a while with me, but I see all of these admonitions about protein, and make sure you get enough protein and 100 gram, whatever it is, that's a gram per pound of body weight. I'm like, I weigh 172 pounds right now. I'm pretty fit. I have low body fat. There's no way I can consume 170 grams of protein a day and feel comfortable. Minimum effective dose, right? So my minimum effective dose of protein is probably around 100, maybe 120 grams a day. And I don't notice any decline in performance or size or muscle mass when I have a day that's 70 grams and then another day that's 120 grams if it averages out to 100, 110 over a couple of days. So one of the things that I've allowed myself permission to not eat as much protein as the conventional wisdom of 2024 would suggest, and it's working for me. I would say one of the things that's come up recently, this whole backlash against alcohol, right? And a lot of people are deciding no alcohol ever, and it's the worst thing you can have and put in your body. And it's it's again antithetical to longevity and to health. First of all, in terms of longevity, many of the Blue Zones people, and Dan, will tell you this.
He's your neighbor, right?
Dan's my downstairs neighbor, Dan Buettner, yeah, and we get along great. And they'll say these people drink wine every day. But this thing about alcohol, I've been looking at it, and it's really interesting because the pendulum does swing, a lot. And I drink wine pretty much every night.
Every night.
2 glasses. Love it. It's part of my routine, part of the beauty of a meal. I feel like I don't digest steak as well if I don't have a glass of wine. So, am I compromising weeks or months on the back end of my life by doing that? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But it's such an enjoyable part of my day and routine, and I take the edge off, and I don't get drunk, and I don't abuse it, and I wake up clear thinking every morning and never have, and now clearly I drink dry farm wines. I drink curated wines that have without sugar and without additives. But it's funny because the conversation went to ethanol. Ethanol is toxic, and that's what you should not be putting in your body. Well, ethanol is a fuel. We burn ethanol. Ethanol has a 7 calories per gram, and we will preferentially burn ethanol. One of the issues that people have with drinking too much is that then their ability to say no to dessert is compromised, and so now they take in too many calories, and then because they're drinking alcohol, the body wants to burn the alcohol off first before it starts burning fat, and so there's that element there. But okay, so ethanol is a fuel, and it's toxic. Glucose is a fuel, and it's toxic in excess. So, everything exists on a spectrum here, and where do you draw the line? It's like if your glucose in your bloodstream is high all the time, I would submit that's a toxic fuel that's in your body. So there are a lot of different ways, to approach this. So I'm sort of viewing what's going on in that space with, I love to see how the terminology and the thought process behind people who want to, kind of raise a new topic of discussion and own that space for a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You agreed, you reposted a post you posted something on X recently, and you agreed to it. Somebody's rules for drinking, they said they only drink during the day, avoid after dark unless a special occasion, exercise before. And I guess the reasoning for that is that exercise improves liver function and acetaldehyde clearance. So why do you think it's important to drink during the day? Obviously, that's a best case scenario.
Well, that's somebody put that up, and that is a best case scenario. But like I say, I drink for dinner, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll stop at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. I'm not drinking into the evening. I don't have a glass of wine before I go to bed, for instance. So, and
why not? Because it impacts sleep?
That's so sleep is part of that. So if I have more than 2 glasses of wine, I will not. By the way, I'll fall asleep great, but then I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's apparently, according to Chinese medicine, that's the time that the liver decides to start processing certain things, and alcohol is one of those. So you can go to sleep and fall asleep and do very well, and then wake up 4 or 5 hours later, and that's then you can't go back to sleep. That's a complaint I hear from people who drink too much. Yeah,
very interesting. Yeah, I drink occasionally. I drink a couple, maybe once or twice a month. I'm not a frequent drinker, but I'm not opposed to it. Yeah, like if there's a good bottle of wine being passed around the table, the dinner table, as it often is at your house or at your dinners, and the protein issue or topic that you've raised, is it because there's a reason that you believe that eating high protein every day is not necessarily beneficial to health, or it's just that's where your tastes are kind of pulling?
Yeah, it's really it's a matter of comfort and taste. Like if I try to, first of all, I eat 2 meals a day, so I don't have breakfast. So there's the first opportunity to get 35 grams of protein kind of cast aside. So now I have to sort of fit the protein into 2 meals, and that works for me, by the way. Not eating until 1 o'clock usually. I feel sharper. I work out fasted every time I work out. I can do an hour and a half bike ride in the heat and the sand at zone 4 and sometimes zone 5. The rationale behind that is your muscles have glycogen. You're always filling your muscles with glycogen, and as long as you don't do it every day and deplete it every day, then you should be able to go out once in a while and do a hard workout and exhaust that glycogen and not have to have food in your belly. So if I eat breakfast and then go do a workout, I don't feel good. I feel, like I'm bloated and full, and blood is being diverted from my muscles that are doing the work to the mesentery and my gut, my digestive tract, trying to figure out how to, absorb and digest this meal. So anyway, so that works for me. So now we're down to 2 meals a day, and can I eat more than 50 grams of protein at each meal? I can, but again, it doesn't feel that good. And I like other foods. I like a variety of foods. So I'm not a carnivore. I'm not just eating a large steak for each of my meals. I'm eating a small portion, or not small, but a reasonable sized portion of meat for a meal, and then some kind of crunchy vegetable or some kind of salty steamed whatever. I like the combination of tastes.
Weren't you doing no vegetables for a while?
Yeah, I was doing fewer vegetables for a while. And what the big thing, the big shift.
For a long time, you were a big advocate of the daily
big ass salad.
Yeah. But then you kind of pivoted, you flip-flopped a little bit.
Yeah.
And now are you back to
No,
that?
I'm not back to it, but when I flip-flopped, I'm like, I don't need a big salad every day. And then it was like, okay, then because it gets in the way of the comfort of being able to take in enough protein. So when I'm eating only 2 meals a day, I also want to be sure that I'm saving space for the right amounts of other macronutrients and things like that. So and back to the protein thing, I'm drinking a protein drink right now, just because you offered, and it tastes pretty good.
20 grams of protein and 100 calories. It's pretty unbeatable.
Shout
out to Slate Milk.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the protein thing, and then I don't do a lot of supplementing with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants anymore.
Big collagen fan though, right?
Big collagen
still?
Fan. Yeah, still, yeah, and partly because ancestrally we ate nose to tail, we ate the gristle and the skin and the knuckles and all of the stuff, and then we didn't melt. We boiled down the carcasses and got the broth and everything that our grandparents did, and maybe even our parents did over the years. That's sort of gone by the wayside, and so we don't really, in our current configuration of dietary options, we don't have a lot of options to take in collagenous material. Even into the 70s and 80s, people ate Jell-O.
You're right.
And Jell-O is collagenous material. It's collagen peptides, gelatin, right? And so every kid had Jell-O at least once or twice a week, and every mom brought an aspic, a Jell-O mold of something to a bake sale or
along
a cook-off or a PTA.
Hefty serving of Red 40.
Yes.
Red Dye 40.
Yeah. But so kids, even into the 70s and 80s, kids got their collagenous, their peptides from those different sources. The moms were taking Knox gelatin. They'd take it for skin, hair, and nails to have stronger nails. When there was a backlash against Jell-O in the 90s and in early aughts for the sugar content, the red dye number, whatever, 40, then all of a sudden every aspect of getting some form of collagen peptide was kind of devoid from the diet. And that's where bone broth started to come back in. But I started to notice that a lot of injuries that were to connective tissue, whether they were Achilles tendinoses or tendinitises or torn ACLs, MCLs, sprains, maybe had something to do with this lack of raw material that people were taking in as part of their diet to repair that connective tissue. Collagen represents a large portion of the protein content of the human body, whether it's fascia, again, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, bones and to a certain extent, skin, hair, and nails. There's a lot of collagen that's used as a raw material in the human body, and if we don't take it in on a routine basis, the body kind of has to go to plan B. Like I had Achilles tendinosis. That was my first real signal that I needed to increase my collagen intake. I had this thickening of these tendons, and I was playing ultimate frisbee, and I was like, I was a sprinter, and I couldn't sprint. For a year and a half, 2 years almost, I was like, my career is over as a top level ultimate player at the age of 58 or whatever it was, and and then I went to an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, well, yeah, you got severe tendinosis in both Achilles. And I said, what do we do? He said, well, we're going to slit you open down the back, and we're going to, scrape it down and pack it and cast it for 3 months. And then you're going to do 9 months of rehab, and you'll be back to 80%. I'm like, screw that. So I went back to the drawing board, and I said, oh my God, it's like, I haven't been taking in any collagen for the last decade. That's the raw material that my Achilles need to repair themselves. So in the absence of these raw materials, the body always has a plan B. Plan B is scar tissue. Let's make some scar tissue. Let's thicken this up to at least, offset the potential damage for now. People get diabetes because of plan B. The body goes, it's too much glucose coming in, and we've exhausted all of the opportunities we have to get rid of it through depositing it in the fat cells. So now we're just going to create, type 2 diabetes.
Well, yeah, because the body starts to store the fat in non-professional sites of fat storage,
Correct.
Like your pancreas, your liver.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where insulin resistance develops.
Right. But it's plan B because rule number one is do whatever you can to get that glucose, that toxic fuel, out of the bloodstream.
Wow. So how many grams a day of collagen are you taking? Do you take it every day?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm pretty fractal in my taking of any supplement. So I take vitamin D once in a while, large doses, and then I don't for a while. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, so it hangs out. I think pretty much the same with collagen. I'll do 20 grams minimum per dose. Sometimes I'll make a collagen drink with Element, collagen, and creatine just before a workout, because it turns out that when you're doing explosive activities, because much of the connective tissue in the body does not have a good blood supply, the best way to infuse it is to ingest it before a workout, and then while you're squeezing those tendons, the flushing of the space around the collagenous material will take in the peptides.
Whoa.
There was an interesting study done, it's probably 15 years old now, but where they labeled collagen peptides and gave a gelatinous drink to people 15 minutes before they jumped rope. And then they jumped rope for 6 minutes, and then they measured the uptake of the labeled collagen peptides in the Achilles. It's pretty cool.
That's so cool. I'm gonna experiment with taking a pre-workout. I've never thought of that, but that's very interesting. One hotly debated topic on social media these days is seed oils.
Yeah.
Which is not a monolith. There's a lot of nuance, I think, that is now thankfully being brought to the table. But you're somebody who's talked about the potential harms to come from over-consuming these kinds of novel fats for a long time. You were very prescient in your talking about this issue. So is there anything that you want to address with regards to them? I mean, would you say that they're the dietary boogeyman that they're often made out to be on social media?
So you use the term nuance, and that's 100% true. All these things exist on a spectrum. So oils are a good example of, there's not just great oils and horrible oils. There are fine and adequate and good oils somewhere in between. Much of it depends on the use of the oil. So you might take a great oil and then and cook with it beyond a smoke point and then turn it into a horrible choice. You might take some of these seed oils that are middle of the spectrum, like high oleic sunflower oil, which I think is a pretty interesting oil, and I would not shy away from it under most circumstances. And I could see using that in certain prepared meals and salad dressings and things like that.
I totally agree. I wouldn't use it in place of extra virgin olive oil, but it has a fatty acid profile very similar to avocado oil. So I would
Correct.
conceivably use it,
Yeah.
if I had to, for
Yep.
whatever reason,
Yep.
use it in place of like an avocado oil.
Yes, exactly. And some of the oils, the corn oil, the soybean oil, the canolas, they've been more castigated for the methods of the processing methods than for the linoleic acid content or the whatever Franken oils that are in there as a result of having gone through that processing. So what we're seeing again is we see the pendulum swinging back. So it was like in the 50s and 60s, margarine was the way to go, and then the 60s and 70s and 80s, get rid of butter because it's horrible for your heart, and then it turns out margarine wasn't so great, didn't taste good to begin with, and then butter came in, and that was great, and then the seed oil thing, which I helped promote, and I think Kate Shanahan was probably the leader of that whole thing, and now I'm starting to be open-minded to the notion that there are some of these oils that were in this horrible list might be okay under certain circumstances, right? And it's the methods of preparation, it's the choice of use as a factor in whether or not they should be avoided at all cost.
Yeah, very interesting.
There's a new one, the algae oil, which is I think algae oil is probably has the best profile of any oil I've ever seen.
It's like all mono. It's all oleic acid.
It's all mono, and it tastes like butter, but it's buttery, I should say. So it doesn't have this biased taste that it imparts to food. Like coconut oil has is great to cook with, but you got to have the right food you're cooking with. Otherwise, it tastes like bologna fudge ice cream or something. So
yeah. Yeah, my stance is that I agree. Like high oleic sunflower oil, I think is fine, but I would still have concern. I definitely avoid the soybean oil, the corn oil. I see no reason to bring them into my house. The primary oils that I use are extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil, and I still and also there are seed oils like sesame seed oil, which I think is a very healthful culinary oil.
Sure, in the right context, it's amazing.
Yeah. I still definitely will. I still have concern about the consumption of these highly refined, bleached and deodorized, high oleic acid, linoleic acid, seed oils, because I just don't think that we have. I think that the observational data that a lot of the pro seed oil advocates will use is confounded.
Yeah,
it's endlessly confounded. By healthy user bias, a lot of these oils, corn oil, still are adorned in the supermarkets by the heart check logo.
For sure.
Right? So it's hard to tease out like the healthy user bias aspect there, that a lot of people have been told that they're the healthier alternative. And so they'll preferentially use those along with, maybe
Sure.
being more inclined to exercise, take a multivitamin, et cetera. And also some of the healthiest foods in the supermarket are rich in linoleic acid, so like nuts and seeds.
Yeah,
I think are a perfectly healthy food. So I think like the observational data is confounded, and the RCT, the human clinical data, I think is equivocal. Like it's kind of all over the place, and I simply just like it's hard for me to trust. They tend to be short term. They tend to fixate on one singular biomarker that's proximally related to cardiovascular disease, right? Like LDL cholesterol. Like, yes, they reduce LDL cholesterol compared to saturated fat. We know that. But what about,
And by the way, even that is like, okay, does that make it a good thing? Like LDL cholesterol reduction isn't necessary. Like,
what does it do to the quality of the LDL particle? That's still
there's
a question.
There's that, and there's still the overarching question is lower LDL necessarily across the board a better thing? I'm not sure it's a better thing. It's just a different thing.
Yeah.
But is it a better thing? And does it, demonstrably lower your risk for cardiovascular disease, for instance?
Yeah, I had Kevin Bass on the podcast recently, who's a scientist who we've become friends, and he said something super interesting. He said that humans, because we're bipedal, we tend to have higher blood pressure, and that promotes atherosclerosis. Like atherosclerosis might be sort of one double-edged sword aspect of what it means to be human to some degree. I mean, it's no secret that it's the number one killer, of Americans today. And so the idea that we should be, striving towards newborn levels of ApoB and LDL doesn't really make a lot of sense because at what cost, right, would those levels be achieved?
Yeah.
Well, you'd have to go vegan to achieve those levels. And we know that being vegan is associated with a whole slew of other risks, worse mental health, worse bone health, less muscle mass.
Yes.
And the necessity to rely on ultra processed foods to meet your protein targets. And so I'm not I still maintain, and and again, these seed oils are primarily the quote unquote benefit of consuming them is in a very specific and narrow context. And it's a context that relies on a few, I think, assumptions, like the assumption, as we've talked about, that lower LDL is inherently better. But we don't know how these fats affect the brain long term. Yeah. They have very easy entry into the brain. They generate, these OXLAMs, oxidized linoleic acid metabolites, which we know are harmful. Their production often, the high heat that they're often exposed to in the cooking environment, which is the context in which they're promoted for use, right, generates really noxious compounds like aldehydes, like acrolein, 4-hydroxynonenal, which is associated,
You've been doing your research. I love it.
We see higher levels in the brains of that
in
people with Alzheimer's disease. And so I just think to say that these are like what Whole30 recently did, that gave them the universal green light. Yeah. I think that's irresponsible, and I think that's I don't think that's the way to go. Yeah.
So as I said, I think these exist on the spectrum. I'm open to examining each one on the merits of it. And for example, hyalinic sunflower, possibly safflower, and as you go down the line, let's look at them individually, not just for their fatty acid profile and their manufacturing process, but the use by which they are for which they are intended. Because there are certain uses that may be more benign than others.
Yeah, I'll happily, drizzle sesame seed oil on my seared ahi. Yeah. I'm trying to think of some other black seed oil. I know has some
peanut oil
purported benefits. Yeah. Peanut oil, but I see no reason to use them in the house. Now, do I freak out? Do I think that they're causal with regards to obesity, as some people often claim, independent of the calories they contain? No, I think that that's primarily likely a calorie issue. Do I freak out when I'm exposed to them in the restaurant setting? No. Do I carry cards with me that say that I'm allergic to canola oil like some do? Yeah. No. I don't think it's good to have fear around these foods, but it's worth remembering that they're ultra processed food ingredients that are highly marketed, highly commercialized. And for that reason, I think it's better to default to for that reason and others, I think it's better to
I would say
to the precautionary principle.
And that precautionary principle would suggest that we know for a fact that extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil are indeed healthy. So at the very least, we know what we can use and get away with if in the absence of anything else, we have access to those. Yeah. Yeah.
Well said. Well, I'm glad we got to clear up some misconceptions about these fats. I had Sarah Ballantyne on the podcast recently, who we had a conversation. It was like a friendly debate. Yeah. But I think the more information people have to make their own decisions, the better.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And like I say, at the end of the day, it comes down to how do I feel. And if I feel good about going out to a restaurant and not caring for that meal, what was used in the preparation of my salad dressing, because it's otherwise a great salad and a great meal. That's where I'm at. It's like as long as for the remainder of the rest of my life and my lifestyle, I kind of adhere to a set of principles and a set of guidelines, right?
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time in France, right? Yeah. In traditional French kitchens, are they using any of these highly refined oils? Or
no, it's almost always
extra virgin olive oil. And it's the Mediterranean dietary pattern. Yeah. It's associated. I mean, it's like lauded in the medical literature.
No, the best piece of fish I ever had in my life was at a tapas grill in Barcelona, and it was just olive oil and fish. And I watched them make it, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what's possible in the simplest context with some salt and pepper. Yeah.
Yeah. Cook like I think food, the Mediterranean paradigm for eating, I think, is a really good one. I mean, it's been kind of maligned with this overemphasis, I think, on grain products, and there's this misconception that it's like a low meat, low protein diet, which I don't think is true.
No,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we get back to the Blue Zones conversation there about like what you would choose to eat if you could afford it and it was available versus what you have to eat, because of the conditions of the local access and things like that. And the Mediterranean diet has a lot of fish, a lot of pork, a lot of some goat in it, some beef. Yeah.
All that stuff. All my favorite foods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Love it, Mark. Thanks for coming out, brother.
Good to be here.
Yeah, always good to see you. Remind listeners where they can follow you on social media. I know you've got this exciting new shoe company. You've got a book that you're working on. Yeah, how can people support?
Yeah, so I'm Mark Sisson Primal on Instagram, and the last year I've been pretty good about posting something on a regular basis. This will be up there. It's some clip of this. The new book is called Born to Walk, and it's available for pre-order on Amazon right now. The shoe company is called Paluva. We make the best-looking five-toed minimalist footwear out there, and people are loving it, and we're getting more and more great reviews all the time. So go to paluva.com to check that out. I guess that's it.
That's the way the cookie crumbles.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.